Good afternoon, everyone. It's Make a Move Mike, aka Michael Harris of Realty Executive Dealing. I'm here with Andy Cruz of Mortgage Heroes, and today we're going to be discussing the emotional expectations of a first-time home buyer. So you may be asking yourself, the emotional expectations of a first-time home buyer, what is all that about? Well, if you've ever been a first-time home buyer, you know what I'm talking about. And for those that you don't know, we're about to discuss it. So one of the things that I find most common, and because I've dealt with probably most of my clients are first-time home buyers. A lot of veterans or active duty military are looking to buy here in San Diego. They decided to get off the fence, and because the home prices are going up, and they've been here 18 years or whatever, and they just want to make that leap instead of going back home because they finally realize they're not going back home. So being anxious, yes, a lot of first-time home buyers are very anxious, extremely anxious. And the reason being is because it's their first time going through this process. Yeah. And it's their biggest purchase they've ever made in their entire life. So you can understand why someone would be anxious in this situation. There's a lot of unknowns, but that's what you have Andy and I here for. We're here to,
it's not our first loan.
It's
not your first sale.
We're here to help kind of curtail that anxiousness and kind of handle any problems before they even get to you. Yeah. And that's the sign of a good agent or lender. They handle problems as they arise before you even hear about them. And in some situations, you might not never hear about them because we'll take care of it. So.
Well, and part of helping cure people feeling anxious is just having so many years of experience, number one, doing so many transactions, but bringing confidence to the process and being able to show you why you should be confident in the process. That has to do with qualifying. It has to do with being realistic and having proper expectations, and us communicating those expectations from the lending side, as well as Mike doing that from the real estate agent side. And really what we found is that when we actually sit down and we go over the process and we answer questions and we address the anxiety in the room and at the table, usually everything kind of calms down. The confidence starts to show up and we go, okay, now we have a game plan. And having a game plan helps in a multitude of ways, not just cure the anxiety, but actually move forward with progress and start reaching milestones way quicker in the process.
Exactly. And even though we kind of curtail that, well, not kind of, we do curtail some of that anxiety, if not all of it, it does rear its head throughout the transaction from time to time. But that's where Andy and I, or the lender and I, or your realtor will just reel you back in. And hey, remember we discussed this? Yeah. This is, we expected this to happen. It's nothing big.
That's that bedside manner.
Right.
Like if it was a doctor, you're like, hey, hold on, here's the results, but here's what that means, and here's what we're going to do.
This is normal. This is normal. Right. So this happens, but because you're a first-time buyer, you're like, whoa, you're freaking out over there. So don't worry about it. You're in good hands. So another thing is the shiny object syndrome. First-time home buyers get that. They get these loan advertisement rates, solicitations from other professionals in the industry. Dream home this on
too much HGTV.
You can buy this dream home on this entry level budget. It doesn't work that way. So we're here to bring you back to reality.
Like Todd and Sonia make $15 an hour, and they have a $4 million budget. Like that's not how that goes.
Exactly. So keep your eye off the shiny objects, please.
Shiny objects are actually one of the main contributors towards distractions during the transaction. So distractions in the transaction have a lot to do with shiny object syndrome, and they can actually divert your goal. They can divert the speed at which things get done, and they can actually cause a problem because it's actually messing up your perspective of what we're trying to achieve in getting you into a home. It's not that you can't have that HGTV home. It's that you got to remember at the beginning of that show what that house looked like at the beginning of the show. Right. Not every home you're going to go look at is going to look like the end of the HGTV show where it's all done and staged and beautifully shot and perfect. Because not all those hit the market. You know why? Because someone loves that house because it's that way. Exactly. So just beware of the shiny object syndrome, and everything should go well.
Exactly. So another thing that commonly occurs during a transaction for a first-time home buyer is after they get the home inspection report, they see this line item of red marks or, repairs that need to be made, or not to be made, but something that the home inspector has pointed out and and recommended as well. Well, it's not always as bad as it appears on paper. So,
right.
In case in point, it may be just small little things like the GFCI breakers or outlets in a kitchen,
right.
things like that.
It could just be like the plate on the light switch is cracked.
Right.
Like, okay, that's like $1.50 at Home Depot,
Yeah.
or is it 75 cents? I don't know. It's not $1,000
Right.
fix. It's a dollar maybe.
Right. So it's not really something that you should be panicking about, because most times it's not really that serious. Now, where it does get serious is if it's a safety issue or it's a government related issue that can prevent your loan from closing or something of that nature.
But I think the point that you're trying to make here is like, don't panic. Like
Right.
the way we respond. Well, first of all, let's talk about don't react, but let's respond to the information we get.
Right.
So there's a big difference between react and respond. It's a whole different conversation. But
Right.
the idea is that, man, it might be easy to have that knee-jerk reaction that won't serve you well in trying to get through the transaction wholly. The home inspection is there to detail for you with a code of standards by the inspector which things at the home you need to be aware of.
Right.
Now that you're aware of them, now how do we respond to those things? And I think that's the key takeaway from this point.
Exactly. So another thing that people, not as often as after the home inspection, but I do find sometimes people panic on when they get the appraisal, or during the appraisal, I should say. They're concerned about the value, which is good reasons in some cases, particularly this market. There's a seller's market, and a lot of buyers are overbidding on properties, asking, and there's concern, is it going to appraise? So there's good reason to kind of be concerned, but never a reason to panic about the appraisal, because what's going to happen is if it does appraise low, you have the potential to go back to the drawing or go back to the negotiating table. Or if it appraises high, then hey, you got equity in your home, baby.
Well, and there's a process to address that. If the appraisal is wrong, there is a process on the lending side to address that and get a second opinion, or even call into an entire second appraisal. Yes. So just because the appraisal comes back and maybe it was like wildly different than what was expected, that doesn't mean that is the end all be all. There is a process for rebuttaling that one, and if necessary, even ordering an additional one.
Right. Now the next thing is EMD, earnest money deposit. Is it necessary? Depending on the market, yes and no. So yes, in some markets,
not required but helpful.
Yes, in this market, I would say it's definitely highly suggested that you do it, because it's going to give you an opportunity to negotiate and compete with other offers. If you don't, then you're just not giving yourself an opportunity. So necessary, yes, in this market especially. In other markets, I would say I suggest it also, because you never know who you're competing with, and you want to give yourself the best opportunity to get your offer selected. Even if it is a buyer's market, if you rate that home as a 10, it's highly likely that other buyers are rating that home as a 10 too, and you want to make your offer more compelling, in order to get your offer accepted.
And rightfully so. I mean, if you're rating this house a 10 out of 10, it meets it checks all the boxes you're looking for, then here's what I'm going to say. Put your money where your mouth is then.
Yeah.
Show that seller, I want your house. Because that earnest money deposit goes towards your down payment if you're making one. It goes towards your closing costs if they're not going to be paid for by a seller credit. So there's already a pot commit of some sort anyways. And especially if you really want that, then put your money where your mouth is. And that's what this point is about, is maybe not so sternly as I'm saying it, but that's the takeaway. That's the idea, is that the earnest money will only help you in convincing the seller that you are a serious buyer for their property.
Yeah. Now, another emotion that goes is it's uncertainty, ambiguity. You know, and one way to clear that up is to ask questions, over communicate with your agent and lender, because this is your first time. We understand that there's going to be more questions from you as opposed to someone that's been through this process 2, 3, 4 times. They kind of know what to expect and know what not, you know, what's normal and what's not. And even in those cases, they still in some, you know, they still ask questions to make sure there's clarity, because they may have forgotten. So if there's something you're unclear about, ask and communicate.
Great point.
Yeah. Now our last point, a lot of buyers can be just impatient. And there's a good reason. Again, this is your first time, but this is probably going to be, from my experience, this has been, for some of my buyers, not all, the most impatient 30 days they've had.
Sure.
Because there's some long weeks.
Yeah.
And understandably so, because you're just kind of waiting for that home inspection or that appraisal to come back. So just be patient, relax, know that it takes 30 days, and you're going to have a little bit of anxiety here and there, but just focus on what you can control. Focus on just living your day-to-day life, going to work and your family or whatever the case may be, and just focus on those things. We'll handle all the rest, and if there's something that needs your attention, I guarantee that we'll bring it to your attention, and we're going to help by doing the best that we can to make sure, if it's an issue, it gets resolved quickly.
And some parts of the process go faster than others. They just do. You know, even though you know, a VA appraisal or VA appraiser is allowed 10 business days to provide the report, sometimes they'll do it in 3. I mean, but they have up until 10. Yeah. So sometimes they'll just take 10, but that doesn't mean at day 7 we freak out. Like, don't freak out. It's not freak out time yet, because also there's a consequence if they don't get it to you by day 10. So just some parts are faster than others. And again, part of having a smooth 30-day escrow process when you're buying a house is having all the other stuff done in advance, so that by the time you're even making an offer, you're already doing that with confidence and the expectation that offer, once accepted, will close. That means having confidence in the lending process, that we've done all the things that we can do financially to get you prepared and ready and qualified and underwritten, so that when you're making that offer and you sign that offer and Mike sends that off to the seller, you already know if that seller says yes, boom, we're just closing. It's a matter of time. It's just a matter of when. Yeah. So sometimes they'd be like, hurry up and wait. But in the waiting, we don't need to become impatient, because sometimes there's just things we're waiting for, and there's things that are outside our control. Right. Again, speaking of the appraisal, well, yeah, we could order it on day 1, but if they have 10 days to do it, I can't call them on day 5. Actually, can't even call them at all. But you know, there's no one that's going to call them on day 5 and put any pressure on them when they have 10 days. Yeah. So sometimes, like, hurry up and order it, but then we're just going to have to now sit back and wait for it to come in, and then we can go on to the next phase.
Yeah, and I've rarely seen it take 10 days in this past year or so. It's usually like 3 to 5 at most. Yeah. You know,
and these people are good. They do. Again, everyone else outside of the lender and the realtor, they all do their part of the process full-time as well. Yeah. So they're really efficient and they do good work. It's just that we have to rely on third parties to do their part inside the 30-day transaction window that we have.
Right. So keep in mind, patience actually is a virtue in this case. So you know, remember, again, as I mentioned, focus on other things, because you are going to be moving at the end of this process, and you've got a ton of things you need to do at your current residence that you need, you know, prep for moving, utility, shutting off, mailing, transfer. There's going to be a lot of things that come up. You're like, whoa, I didn't thought about this. Right. So while you're going through that transaction, you can be focusing on those things instead of keeping your mind 100% solely on the transaction that you're going through, because we're going to pretty much make sure you're good to go in the transaction. You're going to need to make sure you're covered when you're moving from your current residence to your next. So.
And I want to say one last thing about this, Mike, is, and I know you don't know what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say this, and I'm pretty sure you're going to agree. There have been 0 instances where being pushy helped.
Yes.
There have been 0 instances where being absolutely out of control, impatient, and pushy has worked out well. and actually work. It does not work, especially when we're dealing with parties that are outside of our influence. It actually does no good at all. It adds further stress to you as a buyer in the process, and it does nothing to advance the ball down the field and close sooner, close faster, or meet whatever other expectation that is on the table.
Well, that wraps it up for us here today, folks. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions about what we discussed today, or any questions about something we haven't discussed, please feel free to reach out to us, give us a call, give us a text. We will be happy to engage with you and communicate and do our best to help you. So with that being said, take care. Have a great week, everyone.